Good morning, Year 3. Happy Monday. It's the final week of school before half term. Can you believe it? We've already done 4 weeks of learning and we're getting into the final bit where actually we're all going to be pros at comprehension. Before I explain what today's lesson is all about, let's make sure we have the right people and we're all ready for the lesson. So, if you're in the Jade and Indigo group, you actually do not need to do this video. You need to go straight to the writing video. If you're in Indigo groups, you need to go to the writing video that is done by me, Miss Panata. And if you're in the Jade group, you need to go to the writing video done by Miss Fernandez. And that's the Amber group video. If you're confused, don't worry, just follow the instructions in my writing video. Everybody else, if you're not in the Jade and Indigo group, you do need to be here because we need to finish the book Evie in the Jungle. And that is the plan for this week. We're going to finish right to the end of the book. Before we actually do today's lesson material, you need to read the next chapter of Evie in the Jungle. That chapter is called An Interview. Oh, there's a mistake in there. I put in interview. An Interview with a Jaguar. Very formidable creature. Some of you might remember that word from last week. Read through the chapter and just familiarise yourself with what happens in the chapter and who are the main characters, and then come back to this video. So pause this video now and go and do your reading. If you're back, I'm going to assume that you've already read chapter 10 of Evie in the Jungle, which means you can grab your pencil and paper and write down the date and LI, which is here at the bottom. The date is the 18th of May 2020, and the LI is to understand how to recognise different comprehension questions. So a new LI, still related to comprehension. Pause the video, write down the date and LI, and then press play when you're ready to continue with today's lesson. Hello, if you're still watching, that means you've both read chapter 10 of Evie in the Jungle and you've written down the date and LI. So what do I mean when I say we need to understand how to recognise different types of comprehension questions? Well, first of all, let us remember that there are lots of different types of comprehension questions. Have a think in your head, can you name a type of comprehension question? I'm going to do the first one. The first one is prediction. What's another type of comprehension question? Have you thought of one? Okay, hopefully you should have remembered that as well as prediction questions, we also have retrieval questions, which are those ones which are obvious in the text and they're factual and you just kind of need to find the answer. We have inference questions, and that's when it's not obvious, but you need to look for clues in the text, make a deduction, and then support your answer with evidence from the text. They're the tricky ones. An even trickier version of the inference question is the question where you also need to use your empathy. So we can call them inference plus empathy questions, which is when we need to explain why a character feels a certain way or does something or says something. Another type of comprehension question is a vocabulary question. So last week we had a question which was, what does the word formidable mean? That is a type of vocabulary question. In these lessons, whenever you do a comprehension exercise, I have been telling you, by giving you little letters in the question, if it's an inference question, or if it's a retrieval question, or if it's a prediction question, or if it's a vocabulary question. And I've been doing that to help you, because if you know that it's an inference question, then obviously you know that you need to go and find some evidence from the text. So I've been making it a little bit easier for you. However, as you grow up and you do lots of different types of comprehensions, the exam paper or the test is not going to tell you if it's an inference question or a retrieval question or a prediction question or a vocabulary question. You're going to need to use your own skills in order to determine what type of question it is. Now this is quite hard, it's quite challenging, but we're going to do a practice today about how we can identify what types of questions are inference questions or retrieval questions and what clues we can use about the questions to help us determine that. So let's have a look at some example questions from today, which are going to be based on chapter 10 of Evie in the Jungle. Hello, okay, so on this side we have the beginning of chapter 10 of Evie in the Jungle. Just to quickly recap, the part of the story we're at is Evie has just gone through the beginning bit of the jungle and she's met some mosquitoes, she's met the poisonous frog, so she's met loads of different animals. But what they were doing was looking for the jaguar that Professor Garcia had a photo of in her office. So Evie wanted to interview this jaguar. Her dad wasn't too sure about it because jaguars are quite scary and dangerous. But Evie was feeling confident, we think, because she said, "Don't worry, Dad, I've got this." The task for today says, look for the answers to these comprehension questions in the text. State whether you think each question is an inference question or a retrieval question, and then answer it accordingly. I forgot to put a full stop there. See, even teachers make mistakes too. So, look for the answers to these comprehension questions in the text and state whether you think each question is an inference question or a retrieval question. So for today's task, we're not going to worry about all the different types of comprehension questions. We're not going to worry about predictions or vocabulary. We're just focusing on the difference between an inference and a retrieval. So let's have a look at the first question. The first question says, why do you think Evie's mouth suddenly goes dry? Then you can see there's a number in brackets here. The number tells you how many marks the question is worth. Usually, when a question is worth more than 1 mark, it means you need to give a lot of information. Do you think you need to give a lot of information in an inference question or a lot of information in a retrieval question? If you said inference question, you're right, because when you answer an inference question, you actually need to give your answer, you need to explain your answer, you need to support your answer with evidence from the text. So already this is a clue that tells me this could be an inference question. Another clue that tells me it could be an inference question is it says, why do you think? If it's asking me what I think, it can't be an answer in the text that's very factual or obvious, because that wouldn't be an opinion. Remember, retrieval questions are not opinions, but inference questions can be. So the words, why do you think, make me think that this question is an inference question. What's the real test for knowing if a question is an inference question or not? Well, the only real test is if you look for the answer in the text and it's obvious, that's a retrieval question. If you look for an answer in the text and you have to find clues and it doesn't tell you the answer really simply in the text, that's probably an inference question. So, in order for me to determine what type of question this is, I need to try and look for the answer. Why do you think Evie's mouth suddenly goes dry? So, I need to find the bit in the text where her mouth goes dry. It's not on this first page here. Ah, I can see it here. Evie's mouth suddenly felt dry. She turned back and saw her dad's worried face shadowed by trees. And that's really good to know. So nothing after the words about her mouth going dry tell me exactly why she's dry. I know that her dad's worried, that could be related, but it doesn't say Evie's mouth suddenly felt dry because. If I look before, is there any obvious answer in the text? Ah, skills. I also have skills, said the jaguar. Like I could jump from here and land on you with my jaws wide open and kill you, just like that. I wouldn't even break a sweat. And it would be beautiful. So I can see that the jaguar is talking, but there's still no obvious answer, no fact that tells me why Evie's mouth suddenly felt dry. So, I'm pretty sure now that this is an inference question. So in my answer today, and this is what I want you to do as well when you're answering the questions, is I want you to write inference question. So you've figured out there's an inference question, and then you're going to give your answer in the style that you would normally answer an inference question. So we know that when you answer an inference question, you state what you think, you explain why you think that, and you support your answer with an example or evidence from the text. So why do I think Evie's mouth suddenly felt dry? Well, I know that just before, the jaguar was saying that he could easily kill her. So maybe her mouth went dry because she was feeling a bit nervous because he was saying something that was quite scary. So here I'm using my inference plus my empathy. So I need to explain all of that. I think, remember to use the words I think, and remember to answer in a full sentence when you're answering a question. I think Evie's mouth suddenly goes dry because she begins to feel nervous about the jaguar attacking her. Now, why does she feel this way? I think Evie feels this way because before her mouth goes dry, the jaguar says he could easily kill her. So, as you can see, this question is worth 2 marks. And you can see that I've actually answered the question in 2 parts. First, I've given my thoughts about why I think Evie's mouth suddenly goes dry, Then I've explained my reasoning and supported my answer with an evidence from the text. My evidence from the text is that the jaguar says he could easily kill her. Even though this time I didn't use a direct quote because the quote that what the jaguar was saying is quite long, I've still referred to exact evidence from the text that I can see. So that's enough to support my answer. So that's how I have figured out that this is an inference question, and I have answered it as an inference question. So that's exactly what I want you to do. Have a look at the question, figure out what type of question it is, and then answer it in the correct way, depending on what type of question it is. Let's take a look at the next example. Why doesn't the jaguar like humans like Evie? So this question only has 1 mark, so it's probably not asking for very much information. That makes me think it could be a retrieval question, because normally inference questions require more answers, or more information in your answer. But remember, the only real test of if it's an inference question or a retrieval question is if the answer is plain and obvious in the text or not. So I need to find the bit where the jaguar says she doesn't like humans like Evie. Here he says, I don't like your kind, so that's where he's saying he doesn't like humans. I have seen what you are doing to this place, destroying it. I have seen the fires. I've seen the machines. I have seen my home disappear. Your kind destroys. That's what you do. Now here, is it obvious why he hates or doesn't like humans? I think it is, because he literally says, your kind destroys. I've seen you destroying, etc., etc. So even though he doesn't say it in one sentence, we can summarize this in one sentence. And that makes me think that this is a retrieval question, because I didn't have to look at a clue in the text. Jaguar explains to us as a fact why he doesn't like humans. So I'm going to write, better write my answer in red, retrieval question. Then I'm going to answer it as a retrieval question. Remember, with a retrieval question, I don't have to give support from the text if I don't want to, because the answer is very obvious. I can if I want to, but it's only worth 1 mark, so I'm just going to explain it in one sentence. The jaguar doesn't like humans like Evie because humans are destroying his home, the rainforest. And that's enough for me to answer the question. So you can see the difference between the way that I answered the inference question, which had lots of information, it had an explanation for my reasoning, and it had an example from the text, and the retrieval question where I just gave my answer because it was very obvious from the text. So now it's going to be your turn. I want you to look through the questions that I have laid out for you. Have a look at how the question is phrased, have a look at how many marks it's worth, and then have a look to see how easily you can find the answer in the text, and that will help you determine if it's an inference question or a retrieval question. Before I send you off, I just want you to notice this first question. It says, why is the rainforest good for humans? And it's worth 3 marks. Now remember, when we talked about inference questions, we said that often inference questions are worth more marks. So that makes me think this could be an inference question. Now I'm going to look at the text and see if Evie can, or Now I'm going to look at the text and see if there's any evidence, if I can find the answer quickly or not very quickly, or very easily. So here's Evie talking about humans. So this is the paragraph where I know Evie is explaining why the rainforest is good for humans. You see, some humans now understand that saving the jungle and all the creatures who live here is good for everybody in the world. The rainforest not only helps rain, which is good for everything, but it captures a lot of carbon dioxide, and it produces oxygen, which helps everyone and everything alive on this planet. So here, I thought this might be an inference question, but actually Evie's explained lots of reasons why the rainforest is good for humans in very plain English. It's not something I have to really look for clues for, because the answer is there, obviously, in the text. So even though this is worth a lot of marks, it's actually a retrieval question. And the reason it's got 3 marks instead of 1 is because there's actually 3 reasons why the rainforest is good for humans. So if you see a retrieval question that is worth more than 1 mark, it might want you to retrieve more than 1 piece of information from the text. There might be 1 reason, 2 reasons, in this case 3 reasons that you need to find. So even though you don't need to support your answer with evidence from the text or show how you've made a deduction because it's not an inference question, you still need to make sure you give 3 bits of information. So be careful, make sure you think carefully about if they're inference or retrieval questions and answer the questions to the best of your ability. So here are the questions in case you don't have access to the worksheet. Make sure you keep referring to the chapter 10 of Evie in the Jungle while you're answering them. And don't forget that for each question you must say if you think it's a retrieval or an inference question before you answer it. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen. You can pause the video and answer the questions.